Hello, greetings! Naniniwala ba kayo sa mga aliens? Are there aliens out there? Are we alone in the universe? Is there life outside planet Earth? Ngayon, kung gusto niyong malaman ang kasagutan sa mga katanungan na yan, then you should watch this episode of Space, the Final Frontier. Please like and share this live stream. And wag na tayong magpatumpik-tumpik pa. So let's go where no man has gone before.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.
There she is. NASA's Voyager 1. Launched in 1977.
But that's just very small potatoes compared to what the Earth is involved with and knows about.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Greetings and good evening to everybody. I am Professor Jun Cahigal and welcome to episode 4 of Space, the final frontier. Now, Space, the final frontier is a series of online lectures designed to help our students with their online classes. And for this episode, episode 4, we will be tackling the basic questions, may aliens nga ba? Or are we alone in the universe? Or is there life outside the planet Earth? So we will be tackling this basic subject in astronomy known as astrobiology. So please like and share this live stream. And if you have any questions during the lecture or if you have any comments, please don't hesitate to comment or type in your questions in our comment section or chat box. We would like to hear from you. So kung may mga katanungan kayo or any comments about this lecture, please feel free to type in your questions or comments in the comment section or chat box below. Okay, so let's not waste any more time and let us now proceed to our study of astrobiology so that we can answer that basic question, may aliens nga ba? Alright, so join us as we travel where no man has gone before. Hello, greetings, and good day to everybody. I am Surgeon Kahigal, and for this talk, we will be answering this very intriguing question. May aliens ba? Are we alone in the universe? Yan po ang ating topic ngayon. May aliens ba? Okay, so you might wonder how did I got interested in aliens or extraterrestrial life? Alright, I got interested because of watching science fiction TV series and movies, especially Star Trek. Now, everybody, can you take a look at this photo of the officers and crew of the original Star Trek TV series, and this guy is an alien. So I'm sure you know him. He is Mr. Spock, and Mr. Spock is a Vulcan. So alien po siya. And in the next generation Star Trek, this guy is also an alien. He is a Klingon. He is Lieutenant Worf. Klingon po siya. And this lady is Diana Troy. She is also an alien. She is a betazoid. Now, being a biologist by profession and also very passionate in the science of astronomy, I keep wondering, is there life outside the Earth? So that question really bugs me. And also, are we alone in the universe? Do we have neighbors in space? Alright, so these are the questions that we need to answer in this talk. So, how did life started and evolved? Is there life beyond Earth, and how can we detect it? And what is the future of life on Earth and in the universe? Now, since in this talk we will be dealing with life, probably we need to answer this basic question. What is life? Now, the scientific community cannot agree on a definition for life. Even I, as a biologist, I had difficulty in defining what life is. But we can recognize life by what living things do. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the characteristics common to all living things. These are the characteristics or features that allows us to identify an object as alive or not. So they are as follows. So we have organization, homeostasis, the ability to reproduce, growth and development, the ability to respond to a stimulus, and we can include the ability to evolve. Now, what is organization? Now, when we speak of organization, it simply means that living things are made up of atoms. These atoms combine to form molecules. Molecules eventually form organelles, and eventually that will lead to the development of the cell. Cells with similar functions form tissues. Tissues with the same function form organs. Different organs with similar functions form body systems. And different body systems form an entire organism. Different organisms in a group form populations. Populations form communities. And different communities form an ecosystem. So that's what we meant by organization. Now, another characteristic exhibited by living things is homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is basically the maintenance or the regulation of external and internal conditions. Like for example, if it is cold outside, then your body will respond by shaking. We all know in biology that muscular movement produces body heat. So that's one way to regulate external and internal conditions. Or in other words, living things can maintain equilibrium or balance. Now, another characteristic exhibited by living things is the ability to acquire nutrient materials and energy. Now, we all know that living things can convert energy to power life processes, such as plants. Now, we all know that plants can convert the energy from the sun into sugars through the process known as photosynthesis. Animals can convert the energy from food molecules such as carbohydrates and fats into adenosine triphosphate or ATP through the process called cellular respiration. And ATP is used by the body to power life processes such as respiration and excretion. And the sum total of all of these life processes is known as metabolism. Now, another characteristic common to all living things is the ability to reproduce. So, the ability to reproduce includes producing a new organism of the same type. There are two types of reproduction. So first, we have sexual reproduction involving two different types of cells. We have the sperm cell and the egg cell to form a new organism. And we have asexual reproduction wherein there are no sex cells involved, like in the case of bacteria. So the bacteria, they simply split into two without involving any sperm or egg. Now, this process of bacterial reproduction is known as binary fission. Binary fission is a type of asexual reproduction. Also, living things are capable of growth and development. Growth refers to the increase in size, and as the organism grows, it manifests certain changes. So these changes as the organism grows is referred to as development. Also, living things are capable of responding to external stimuli, like in the case of this Macahea plant. So as we touch the leaves of the Macahea plant, the leaves will close. So living things, they respond to certain environmental factors such as light, touch, and changes in temperature. So living things can respond to external stimuli. Now, another characteristic common to all living things is the ability to evolve. So all living things, they have changed over time. So they need to change because they need to adapt to their environment in order to survive. Adaptation simply means that the organism must become suited to its environment in order to survive. So they need to change over time. So all living things are capable of evolving, like fishes turning into amphibians, amphibians turning into reptiles, and eventually some reptiles turned into birds, and even 3 swinging apes turning into humans. So that's the ability to evolve, and those are the characteristics common to all living things. Now, before we can answer that question, may aliens ba or is there life outside planet Earth, we need first to understand how did life on Earth started. So before we could answer this question, let's have a simple pop quiz. So, are you excited for this pop quiz? Madali lang to. So, I encourage everybody to participate. So, just type in your answers later in the comment section or in the chat box. Okay, so here is the question. So imagine you have a time machine with a dial that you can spin to send you randomly to any time in Earth's history. If you spin the dial and travel back through time about 2 billion years and walk out of the time machine, what is most likely to happen to you? So letter A, you'll be eaten by dinosaurs. Letter B, you'll suffocate because you'll be unable to breathe the air. Letter C, you'll be consumed by toxic bacteria. And letter D, nothing. You'll probably be just fine. Okay, so please answer this simple pop quiz. You may type your answer in the chat box. Alright, go! Alright, so very easy. So I can see that some of you got the right answer. So the correct answer is B. So you'll suffocate because you'll be unable to breathe the air. Now, why is it that we'll suffocate to death if we walk out of that time machine 2 billion years into the past? So let's travel back in time and let's see what the Earth was like at about 2 billion years ago. Now, the oceans covered almost the entire planet. Just 2% to 3% of the Earth's surface would have been land compared with 28% of today. So, if you're an alien, if you have visited the Earth at about 2 billion years ago, then you will say that the planet Earth was a watery world. And there's lots of volcanic activity 2 billion years ago. So there were lots of volcanoes and lots of eruptions. And because of this volcanic activity, the early atmosphere was formed. Our atmosphere was formed through the process known as outgassing due to volcanic activity. So outgassing is referred to as the outpouring of gases from the Earth's interior. Alright, and also the atmosphere was crushingly dense and completely unbreathable. So the gases in our atmosphere includes the following. So you have carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor. And there was no oxygen at about 2 billion years ago. Alright, and because of the absence of oxygen, there is also the absence of the ozone layer. Okay, ozone is O3. So if there is no oxygen, there is the absence of this ozone layer. And because we know that the ozone layer protects the planet from UV rays from the sun, 2 billion years ago, the Earth was bathed with deadly UV radiation from the sun. And there was also intense lightning activity at about 2 billion years ago. Now, because of this intense electrical discharge or lightning, Plus the conditions that I have mentioned a while ago, it triggered certain chemical reactions to occur. So these primordial conditions plus the energy from lightning, and we should also include heat energy from volcanic activity, it caused these chemicals to react. And these chemical reactions later led to the evolution of the first living cell. Now, this idea of the formation of the first living cell is known as the abiotic synthesis of organic molecules. The abiotic synthesis of organic molecules led to the development of micelles or primitive cell membranes. So these micelles led to the development of the first living cell. The first living cells, they were in the form of anaerobic bacteria. So when you say anaerobic, these are cells that doesn't need oxygen to survive. Now, these anaerobic bacteria, they dominated our primitive Earth for millions of years until some of them had undergone mutations and led to the development of a new type of molecule called chlorophyll. So these mutations led to the formation of a new type of cell known as cyanobacteria. Now, these cyanobacteria, they contain that new molecule called chlorophyll that enabled them to harness the energy from the sun through photosynthesis. And you know what that means. The byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. So these cyanobacteria, they oxygenated our primitive atmosphere. These cyanobacteria, they form colonies called stromatolites. So these cyanobacteria, they oxygenated our primitive atmosphere. Alright, so those are the stromatolites, which are colonies of these cyanobacteria. Alright, so because of this, the appearance of these cyanobacteria, this led to the development of a new process of harnessing energy from the sun called photosynthesis. And because of photosynthesis, they were able to release oxygen for the first time. The cyanobacteria, they oxygenated our primitive atmosphere. And because of oxygen, that led to the formation of ozone. And because of ozone being a protective barrier against UV rays from the sun, that led for the earth being more conducive for the evolution of higher life forms. Now, is there any proof of this explanation on how life started based on the conditions of the primordial earth? Now, there was an experiment conducted by two American biochemists by the name of Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, the so-called Miller-Urey experiment. Now, they performed this experiment to replicate the conditions of the primordial earth in order to prove that organic molecules could be produced under such conditions. So they came up with this fascinating setup to duplicate or to replicate the conditions of the primordial earth. Now, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey had introduced the primordial gases such as methane, ammonia, and water vapor into the setup. So those gases will duplicate the gases of our primitive atmosphere. Now, with regards to the intense electrical discharge or lightning in our primitive atmosphere, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey had installed electrodes in the setup. Now, when connected to an electric current, these electrodes will produce sparks. And these sparks will duplicate the intense electrical discharge or lightning in our primitive atmosphere. And also in the abiotic synthesis theory, the Earth was hot due to volcanic activity. Now, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey duplicated the temperature of the Earth by boiling water. So that boiling water will simulate volcanic activity of about 2 billion years ago. And this experiment was conducted for about a week. And after a week, they analyzed the water and they discovered organic compounds such as amino acids, formic acid, urea, and including nucleic acids. So this experiment supported the abiotic synthesis of organic molecules. Now, isn't that fascinating about this experiment conducted by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey and how they duplicated the conditions of the primitive Earth in the laboratory? So more or less, this is the explanation on how life on Earth had started. So by analyzing that water after a week, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey had discovered 20 amino acids, ATP or adenosine triphosphate, sugars, lipids, purines, and pyrimidine bases of DNA and RNA. Alright, so that's how life on Earth started. Okay, so isn't that fascinating indeed? Now, here is an animation from the TV series Cosmos by Carl Sagan, just to give you an idea of how life on Earth had evolved. So watch and be fascinated.
Those are some of the things that molecules do, given 4 billion years of evolution. Every plant and animal alive today has a history as ancient and illustrious as ours. Humans stand on one branch, but now we affect the future of every branch of this 4 billion year old tree.
Now, isn't that fascinating indeed? Now, in order to understand the role of life in the universe, we must explore the range of environments that might support living things. So, our search for life beyond our planet is informed by what we know about life on Earth. And life as we know it here on Earth requires the following, such as liquid water, that's very obvious. We need also some form of energy such as sunlight or probably heat from volcanic activity. We also need access to organic compounds such as carbon compounds. And also we need a stable environment such as time to originate and to evolve. Now, because of these requirements, in order for life to exist, our search for life outside planet Earth has become the search for water. The search for life outside Earth has become the search for water. Now, what is the case for water? Ano ba ang meron sa tubig? Now, water is special. Water exhibits certain properties that allows it to sustain life. And one of those properties is cohesion. Now, by definition, cohesion is the attraction of like molecules. Now, water molecules are attracted through hydrogen bonding. And because of the hydrogen bonding ability of water, water is quite cohesive, as you could see in this demonstration. So you can add several drops of water in that single penny. So this demonstration shows how cohesive water really is. Now, another property of water that is essential to life is adhesion. Now, adhesion is the attraction of unlike molecules. Now, in the case of plants, water molecules are attracted to the xylem vessel wall, and together with cohesion, water is transported from the roots to the stem and to the leaves of plants. And this is what we call as capillary action. Now, another special property of water is surface tension. Now, surface tension is the ability of water molecules to form a thin film. And this thin film of water molecules will allow certain objects to literally float on water like this paper clip. So this paper clip is supported by the thin film of water molecules. So that is surface tension. And even animals can harness that surface tension of water so that animals such as this spider can literally walk on water. Now, another property of water that is essential to sustain life is that water has a high heat capacity. Now, what does this mean? Now, it simply means that water can absorb a great deal of heat. So, we have here a demonstration to show the high heat capacity of water. So, what we have here is a water balloon. So, if you apply heat on a water balloon, that water balloon will not pop or it will not burst simply because the water inside the balloon absorbs that heat from that flame. So isn't that fascinating that water has a high heat capacity? And because of water having a high heat capacity, this is essential to life here on Earth. Now we know that our Earth is covered with about 60% water through our oceans and seas. So our oceans acts like a tremendous heat sink in order to moderate our global temperature. So that's the importance of water having a high heat capacity. Now, another property of water which is essential in sustaining life is that water expands as it freezes. So if you'll get a glass container and fill it with water up to the brim and place it inside the freezer, then as water turns into solid, water expands, and as a result, your glass container will break. So what is going on here? Now, because of the hydrogen bonding ability of water, water becomes less dense as it turns into solid than it is as a liquid, and as a result, ice floats on water. And since ice is less dense, it forms on the surface at first. And as water freezes, it releases heat to the water below and insulates it. So that's why our oceans and lakes don't freeze solid. Now, the expansion of water upon freezing is vital to life on Earth. It is what causes ice to be less dense as a solid than as a liquid. This means that ice floats in liquid water. Ice is less dense than liquid water at 4 degrees Celsius. This may not seem like a very important property, but the fitness of the environment would drastically change if water was less dense than ice. All bodies of water would eventually freeze over if ice did sink, eventually making life on Earth impossible. If the river froze from bottom up, fish and other animals would not survive. However, if the frozen water floats, the fish will have a much better chance of survival. Now, aside from the search for water, another thing that we need to consider in our search for extraterrestrial life would be the so-called Goldilocks zone or the so-called habitable zone. Now, what is the Goldilocks zone or habitable zone? Now, the Goldilocks zone is the distance around the sun supporting life. And in the case of our planet, our distance of 93 million miles from the sun is just right to support life. So that means that our Earth is lucky to be in the right place for life to exist. Now everybody imagine this. Now if our planet would be close to the sun, let's say that of the planet Venus, then our planet would be too hot. So our oceans would boil up and life would be impossible. Now imagine if our planet would be far from the sun, let's say that of the planet Mars, then our oceans would turn into ice, water would exist in solid form, and life would be impossible. So this distance of 93 million miles from the sun is just right for life to exist. Now I mentioned something about Venus and Mars. Now these planets, they exhibit extreme environmental conditions. Now the question is, can extreme environments like that of the planet Mars support living things? Now what do you think? Alright, so the answer is yes. Extreme environments can support living things. Why? Because life can find a way. Alright, and there are creatures that can live in extreme environmental conditions. Here on Earth, we call them extremophiles. Extremophiles, these are organisms that can survive in extreme conditions. Alright, so we have here examples of extremophiles like halophiles. Halophiles are organisms that can live in extreme salt conditions. Or we have acidophiles. Acidophiles, they can survive in extreme acidic conditions. And we have thermophiles. Thermophiles, these are organisms that can live in extreme temperatures. Now, I want to focus on this fascinating creature known as Deinococcus radiodurans. Now, one of the most surprising cases of tolerance to extreme conditions is exhibited by this bacterium known as Deinococcus radiodurans, which is found in the cooling water of nuclear reactors. So this bacteria can tolerate high radiation. Now, isn't that fascinating about Deinococcus radiodurans? These bacteria can survive even in high doses of radiation. Now, another fascinating creature that I want you to focus on are the tardigrades or water bears. Now, the tardigrades, they are typically 0.5 millimeters in length. And would you believe that they can survive virtually in any extreme environmental conditions, even in the vacuum of space? Now, these tardigrades, they can live anywhere on Earth, in the frigid peaks of the tallest mountains, the cauldrons of erupting volcanoes, and in the deep ocean vents at the bottom of the sea. So, if we would bring a tardigrade to the moon, these creatures will survive. And if we would bring the tardigrade to the planet Mars, then this creature will really survive on the Martian surface. So isn't that fascinating? Now, are you not fascinated about the tardigrades? Now, if so, please let us know. Kindly type in your reactions or even your comments or questions in the chat box or comment section. We would like to hear from you. Gusto namin malaman ang inyong mga reactions about this fascinating creature. Now, life as we know it here on Earth requires liquid water, energy, nutrients, a habitable zone to survive. And also we mentioned that life can withstand extreme environmental conditions such as the tardigrades and even Deinococcus radiodurans. Now, what about life as we don't know it? Now, before we answer that question, I will transfer to another place. So while waiting for a few minutes, please type in your reactions or your comments or even your questions about this part of the lecture. Alright, so Scotty, beam me up. Energize. Hello, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. Now let's continue with our lecture on the possibility of life outside planet Earth, or may aliens ba? Alright, now we know that life on Earth requires liquid water, energy, nutrients, and a habitable zone to survive. And also, if you will recall, life can withstand extreme conditions. So we mentioned Deinococcus radiodurans that can withstand high doses of radiation, and also the tardigrades or the water bears. Now, what about life as we don't know it? Now, studies of life in extreme environments on Earth have led us to focus on some prime places to look for life. So we are now considering some members of the solar system that might support life. So we have the following, like Mars. Mars is a pretty good candidate for the existence of life outside planet Earth. Also, we have Europa, one of the Galilean moons of Jupiter. Then we have Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, and Enceladus, one of the moons of Saturn. Now, let us study the possibility of life on the red planet Mars. Now, Mars is probably the planet most likely to harbor life. Now, why? Now, there is abundant geological evidence from spacecraft explorations that Mars once had a thicker atmosphere and probably liquid water on its surface. Now, at present, there is no liquid water on the Martian surface. Water would simply evaporate due to the low Martian atmospheric pressure. But there is evidence to prove that liquid water may once have flowed in the past. Now, our astronomers have discovered geological structures that resemble canals or channels. So this is an evidence to prove that water may once flowed on the Martian surface. So these geological structures resembled canals, and these canals may have been carved by running water. So there are canals or channels on the Martian surface. And these channels or canals may have been carved by running water. So there is geological evidence to support the idea that water may have once flowed on the Martian surface. So the question is, where is now the water? Now, water may have been trapped in the polar ice caps. The polar ice caps of Mars contains mostly carbon dioxide ice or dry ice, but it may also contain water. Now, water is thought to have flowed across the surface of Mars billions of years ago, when its atmosphere was thicker and warmer, cutting gullies and channels that are still visible. But today, the low atmospheric pressure means that any surface water would boil away. So water survives frozen in polar ice caps and in subsurface ice deposits. Now, it was the Americans through NASA that spearheaded the exploration of Mars. And one of the early space probes that landed on the red planet was Viking. So the Viking probes of the mid-1970s carried experiments designed to detect microorganisms in the Martian soil at their respective landing sites. So there were two Viking space probes, Viking 1 and Viking 2. And the Viking probes, they are mobile laboratories designed to detect any microorganisms that might be present in the Martian soil. So this is Viking that soft landed on the planet Mars. And Viking has a retractable robotic arm that can scoop out Martian soil. The Martian soil is then delivered to the mobile laboratory. Now here is a panoramic view of the Martian surface taken by the Viking space probe. So you will notice through the pictures that the Martian terrain resembles that of a desert. Now, since the Martian temperature resembles that of Antarctica, we can say that the Martian terrain resembles that of a frozen desert. Okay, so isn't that fascinating about the Martian terrain? Now here is a cutaway view of Viking, and this is the cutaway view of the biolab that was designed to detect the presence of any microorganisms in the Martian soil. So let us now study briefly what this biolab package in Viking does. Now, this is the so-called labeled release experiment. The labeled release experiment mixed small samples of Martian soil as scooped up by the robotic arm of Viking with drops of water containing a nutrient solution and some radioactive carbon. The instrument then sampled the atmosphere of its internal chamber, as you could see in the diagram. If it detected the radioactive carbon, the thinking went, then microorganisms in the soil must have metabolized the nutrients and emitted the carbon. The air around the control version, in contrast, heated up to temperatures, yet Viking saw no signs of life or of the other organic compounds needed to support life. So many scientists concluded that the results were too good to believe that the findings might be explained by reactive chemicals such as percolates in the Martian soil. So NASA had sent more probes on the red planet to continue the search for life. So here is a picture of the Viking lander's sampling arm that scooped up samples of Martian soil. The Martian soil was then brought to the biological instrument package on board Viking and automatically conducted several biology experiments that would detect any signs of life present in the Martian soil. But unfortunately, none were found. So NASA continued the search for life on the planet Mars. Now, some of the latest Mars information comes from the 5 active probes on or in orbit around Mars, including 3 orbiters and 3 rovers. So this includes the following. So we have Pathfinder, the 2001 Mars Odyssey, Mars Express, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the Sojourner rover, rover, the Opportunity rover, the Curiosity rover, and this coming Feb 18, 2021, we have the Perseverance rover that will land on the planet Mars. So we have here the Mars Pathfinder rover Sojourner exploring the Martian surface. Then we have the Opportunity Mars rover. Then we have here the Mars Curiosity rover, and this rover is as big as a Volkswagen. And we have here the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover, and by the way, this coming Feb 18, 2021, the Perseverance rover will land on the red planet. The Perseverance rover is equipped with specialized equipment, and what is so fascinating about the Perseverance rover is that it has with it a helicopter called the Ingenuity helicopter. So isn't that fascinating indeed? Although Mars has the most Earth-like environment of any other planet in the solar system, the surface is too dry and too cold and too affected by solar ultraviolet radiation to meet the requirements for habitability. So our search for life on the red planet continues. NASA continues the search for possible life on the red planet, and that's the mission of the Perseverance rover. Now let's take a look at the possibility of life on Europa, one of the Galilean moons of Jupiter. Now the Voyager space probes have visited Europa, and the Voyager space probes have discovered that the surface of Europa is covered with a thick icy sheet. Now scientists think that Europa's icy sheet is about 10 to 15 miles thick, and scientists believe that beneath that icy sheet may be liquid water. So that icy sheet may be floating on an ocean at about 40 to 100 miles deep. So while Europa is only 1/4 the diameter of Earth, its ocean may contain twice as much water as all of the Earth's oceans combined. So that is Europa. Europa may contain a vast inner ocean. So underneath that thick icy sheet, Europa may contain a vast inner ocean that's thought to be in contact with its seafloor, potentially infusing the water with the energy and nutrients needed to support life. Okay, so that is Europa, one of the Galilean moons of Jupiter. And as discovered by the Voyager space probe, the surface of Europa is covered with this thick icy sheet made of water ice. And scientists believe that beneath that icy sheet may contain liquid water. So that's the story of Europa. So beneath that solid ice may be liquid water. So Europa is a pretty good candidate for the existence of life outside planet Earth. And what's exciting about Europa is that in 2013, the Hubble Space Telescope discovered water vapor venting from the surface of Europa. Now, this discovery that water vapor is ejected or venting on the surface of Europa is very significant. This would prove the idea that beneath the icy sheet of Europa is liquid water. And if there is liquid water, then probably microbial life may exist. So this discovery of water vapor venting from the surface of Europa will strengthen Europa's position as the top candidate for potential habitability of microbial life. Now, NASA is planning a mission to Europa. So NASA plans to send a robotic space probe. This robotic space probe will drill a hole through the icy sheet of Europa. And once the space probe penetrated the thick icy sheet of Europa, it will send a robotic submarine to explore the inner oceans of Europa. So isn't that fascinating indeed? Now let's take a look at the possibility of life on Titan. Titan is the largest moon of Saturn. Now, Titan, being Saturn's largest moon, is a mysterious place. Titan is the only moon in the solar system that has a thick atmosphere. Titan's atmosphere is composed mostly of nitrogen, which is similar to the Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere is composed mostly of nitrogen at about 70% and 21% is oxygen. So Titan's atmosphere is quite similar to our atmosphere here on Earth. And Titan's atmosphere also contains organic compounds aside from nitrogen. Now, Titan and Saturn has been visited by the Voyager space probes. So the Voyager space probes visited Saturn and some of its moons, and the Cassini-Huygens probe also visited Saturn. Now, the Huygens probe visited and landed on Titan. Okay, so Titan has been visited by the Huygens probe and made a soft landing on its surface. And like what I have mentioned, the atmosphere of Titan is composed mostly of nitrogen with traces of other organic compounds such as argon and methane. And compare that with our atmosphere, the Earth's atmosphere is also composed mostly of nitrogen with oxygen that is about 21% and other organic compounds such as argon. Now, the Huygens space probe have made significant discoveries on Titan. The Huygens space probe have discovered liquid on Titan. Not liquid water, but liquid methane. In fact, the Huygens space probe have discovered lakes of methane on the surface of Titan. Now, we know here on Earth that there are organisms called methanogens that can withstand very high concentrations of methane. So there is a possibility that these methane lakes may support similar organisms or methanogens. So that is very fascinating indeed. And in June of 2010, scientists analyzing data from the Cassini-Huygens space probe reported anomalies in the atmosphere near the surface which could be consistent with the presence of methane producing organisms, but may alternately be due to non-living chemical or meteorological processes. So we still need to confirm such findings. And what's more exciting about the Huygens space probe is that the Huygens space probe have discovered a new molecule, and this molecule brings hope for the existence of life on Titan. This molecule found on Saturn's moon Titan could foster life, and this molecule is called acrylonitrile. Now, this molecule is a vital component for cell formation. So therefore, its presence is a strong indicator that life could well exist in one of Titan's many methane lakes and seas. Now, this molecule is so fascinating. Now, well, in fact, back here on Earth, acrylonitrile is also known as vinyl cyanide. And vinyl cyanide is useful in the manufacture of plastics. Now, under the harsh conditions of Saturn's largest moon, Titan, this molecule, acrylonitrile, is thought to be capable of forming unstable, flexible structures which is similar to the cell membrane. So many scientists believe that the presence of acrylonitrile may foster life on Saturn's largest moon. Now, what about the possibility of life on Enceladus? Enceladus is also one of Saturn's moons. Now, the Cassini-Huygens probe have discovered water vapor venting on the surface of Enceladus, which is similar to Europa. And complex molecules have been discovered in the plumes of Saturn's moon Enceladus by the Cassini-Huygens probe. The data transmitted back to Earth by the Cassini-Saturn orbiter, which ended its service above the ring world on September 16, 2017. So isn't that fascinating that Enceladus also vents water vapor on its surface? And this is a strong indication that Enceladus may foster life. Okay, and the presence of liquid water venting on the surface of Enceladus and the discovery of complex organic molecules makes Enceladus a potentially habitable world for microbial life. So isn't that fascinating indeed? So at this point, we were able to enumerate some members of the solar system that are potentially habitable for microbial life. Now, the next thing that we need to ask ourselves is, how are we searching for extraterrestrial life and possibly intelligent life outside our solar system? So, does life exist on an extra solar planet? And how can we find it? So that's the question that we need to answer. Now, there was a scientist by the name of Frank Drake, and he came up with this equation known as the Drake's equation. Now, I am not really good in math, but to put it simply, this is what the Drake's equation is. So, if you will gaze at the night sky, there are billions and billions of stars in our Milky Way galaxy alone. And there are billions and billions of galaxies in the observable universe. So, since there are so many stars, there must be other planets with life. And even if only one in a billion G stars that has the right set of conditions to make a planet like Earth, and since there are many billions of G stars in the observable universe, then there must be other planets like Earth with biospheres. That is the essence of the Drake's equation. So, ang ibig lang sabihin ni Frank Drake dito, so sang damakmak na mga bituin sa kalawakan, sa dami nila, hindi natin maalis ang posibilidad na may mga planeta na kagaya ng mundo natin. There must be other planets like Earth with biospheres. Kasi sa dami ng mga bituin sa kalawakan, imposible na walang planeta dyan. There must be other planets similar to Earth with biospheres. So, ang tanong ngayon, have we discovered planets outside the solar system? So the answer is yes. We have discovered thousands of planets outside the solar system, and we call them exoplanets. And this was discovered by the Kepler Space Telescope. The Kepler Space Telescope is a space observatory launched by NASA to discover Earth-sized planets orbiting other stars. And this observatory was named after the astronomer Johannes Kepler. The spacecraft was launched on March 7, 2009 into an Earth-trailing heliocentric orbit. Now here is an animation of the orbit of the Kepler Space Telescope. The Kepler Space Telescope was launched in an Earth-trailing heliocentric orbit around the Sun. So kung mapapansin ninyo, yung Kepler Space Telescope ay sinusundan lang niya yung Earth as it revolves around the Sun. So that is the movement of the Kepler Space Telescope. Now the question is, how does the Kepler Space Telescope identify an exoplanet? Now, the method that was used in identifying an exoplanet is the so-called transit method. So, in the transit method, we use the spectroscope. Now, the spectroscope is used to detect the incoming light from the star. Now, if there is a planet between us and the star, that planet will temporarily block some of the light from the star once every orbit, and this is detected by the spectroscope, a process known as photometry. So if you will notice in this animated illustration, as the planet travels between us and the star, it partially blocks some of the light, and this is detected by the spectroscope. So this method, called the transit method, is used by the Kepler Space Telescope to detect the presence of exoplanets. So to further explain the transit method used by the Kepler Space Telescope in discovering exoplanets, let's take a look at this animated illustration. So when a planet passes between a star and the Kepler Space Telescope, it partially blocks the incoming light. So there is dimming or reduction of light as the planet passes between the Kepler Space Telescope and the star. And the Kepler Space Telescope have discovered thousands of these exoplanets by observing planetary transits. The Kepler Space Telescope mission was designed to explore the diversity and structure of exoplanetary systems. Its 9-year mission resulted in the discovery of thousands of confirmed exoplanets. So isn't that fascinating indeed? Now, because of the discovery of these exoplanets by the Kepler Space Telescope, our prime candidate worlds in the search for life beyond the solar system are terrestrial-type planets within the habitable zones of their stars. So, the Kepler Space Telescope had confirmed the discovery of these thousands of exoplanets. So, is there life on those potential habitable exoplanets discovered by the Kepler Space Telescope? Meron nga bang buhay doon? Now, we don't know, but the search continues. So, can we visit those exoplanets para malaman natin kung may buhay nga doon? Can we visit these exoplanets? So the answer is no. We cannot go to those exoplanets because of their extreme distance. Masyado po silang malayo. So if we cannot go, then how? Paano natin malalaman if life can exist on those exoplanets? So, we need to look for global biomarkers. So, ito yung gagawin natin para malaman natin if life can exist on those exoplanets. We need to look for biomarkers. These biomarkers should involve changes in atmospheric or surface chemistry that can only be the result of life. Now, what are these biomarkers that we need to look in order to determine whether an exoplanet can support life. Now, one biomarker is oxygen. Alright? So, if you find oxygen in any of those exoplanets, maybe some photosynthetic organisms must have created that oxygen. So, we know that the byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. So, ang ibig lang sabihin nito, kung may makikita kayong oxygen sa isang exoplanet, iisa lang ang ibig sabihin yan. That oxygen was produced by photosynthetic organisms. So, ibig sabihin, baka may mga photosynthetic organisms sa exoplanet na yan pag nakita nyo yung biomarker na oxygen. Now, another biomarker is methane. Now, methane is produced by microorganisms. So, without the presence of life, methane would be quickly oxidized and disappear from the atmosphere. Now, if you would find methane and nagtagal yung methane dyan, that means only one thing, that methane is produced by these microorganisms. So, methane is another important biomarker in the search for extraterrestrial life outside our solar system. So the detection of these biomarkers, oxygen and methane, they play an important role in our search for extraterrestrial life. So the detection of large amounts of methane and oxygen in the atmosphere of an extrasolar terrestrial planet would be a smoking gun. And NASA is now planning to launch the so-called NASA's Terrestrial Planet Finder. So this terrestrial planet finder is equipped with a spectroscope. The spectroscope should allow atmospheric chemists and biologists to use the relative amounts of gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, water vapor, ozone, methane to find whether an extrasolar planet may support life. Now, with the spectroscope on board the terrestrial planet finder, we should be able to detect these biomarkers such as carbon dioxide, oxygen, and methane. And hopefully, we can detect the presence of life in any of those exoplanets. Now, aside from the Kepler Space Telescope, what other methods are employed to search for life or possibly intelligent life outside the solar system? So, we are now making use of radio telescopes to scan the radio sky in search for alien signals. Now, in the United States, there is an institute called SETI. SETI is the acronym for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And the SETI Institute uses radio telescopes combined with optical telescopes to search for signals that might be emitted by technologically advanced life forms. Now, I want to zoom in on this particular radio telescope used by SETI. This is the Arecibo Radio Telescope. The Arecibo Radio Telescope is the second largest radio telescope in the world. The largest radio telescope in the world is FAST, and that is in China. Now, was SETI successful in detecting alien signals? Now, the results of the SETI search was that there was detection of artificial signals. But often these signals are identified as human sources. And sometimes these signals are unidentified but still not securely confirmed. In other words, we really cannot confirm whether these signals are from human sources or these signals may come from intelligent life outside our solar system. Now, in November 16 of 1974, a 169 seconds message was sent by SETI through the Arecibo radio telescope, and the radio telescope was pointed towards globular cluster M13 at about 25,000 light years. This is the so-called Arecibo message, and this was our first attempt to communicate with aliens. Now, this message was written by several scientists, including the one and only Carl Sagan. Now, let us go into the details of this interesting and intriguing encoded message that was sent by the Arecibo radio telescope towards globular cluster M13. Now, on top are the numbers 1 to 10. Then below that are the representations of the atomic numbers of key biological elements like oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. Then below that are the formulas for the sugars and bases in nucleotides of DNA. So we have adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Then below that is the shape of the DNA molecule, which is a double helix, as you could see in this coded message. Then below that is a human figure. Then below the human figure is the representation of the solar system with the Earth displaced upwards. And below the representation of the solar system is the shape of the Arecibo radio telescope. So this was the message that was sent by the Arecibo radio telescope towards globular cluster M13. So we were able to send this coded message in outer space. So we are just waiting for a response. Sana may mag-reply sa ating pinadalang mensahe sa outer space. So if there is a high possibility for extraterrestrial life or possibly extraterrestrial intelligent life, then, where is everybody? Nasaan yung mga aliens na yan? Okay, nasaan ba sila? Ba't hindi ba natin sila makita? Now, this was the question raised by a scientist by the name of Enrico Fermi. The paradoxical question that Enrico Fermi asked was, where is everyone? Nasaan yung mga aliens? Where are the aliens? Nasaan sila? That was the paradoxical question Enrico Fermi asked. So, what we have here are the possible solutions to the Fermi paradox. Ito yung magsasagot kung bakit wala tayong makitang mga aliens. So, bakit nga ba wala tayong makitang aliens? Now, one possible solution is this, that we are alone. We are the first, and there is no galactic civilization. Yun ang dahilan kung bakit wala tayong makitang mga aliens, because we are alone and we are the first. And there is no intergalactic civilization. Nag-iisa lang tayo sa universe. So, another possible solution to the Fermi paradox in order to answer the question, where are the aliens, nasaan yung mga aliens na yan, is that civilizations are common. Alien civilizations are out there. May mga aliens. But no one has colonized the galaxy. Parang ayaw nilang mag-colonize ng mga planeta sa galaxy natin. Now, why? Bakit kaya ayaw nilang mag-colonize? Now, one possible reason is that of technological difficulties. Interstellar travel is difficult and vastly more expensive or dangerous than we think. So isipin na lang po natin yung mga astronauts dito sa Earth. So our astronauts, they have to endure the perils of space travel like life support, the dangers of radiation, weightlessness, and space travel is expensive, mahal po. Just look at the Apollo program. The United States had spent billions of dollars in their their Apollo program. What more yung mga aliens na yan? So siguro natatakot sila because of the dangers and difficulties of space travel. Kaya ayaw nilang mag-colonize ng mga planeta sa galaxy because of the dangers and the financial burden of space travel. Now, another possible solution to the Fermi paradox in order to answer the question where is everyone, nasaan yung mga aliens, bakit wala tayong ma-encounter na alien civilization? Now, maybe because of our desire to explore is unusual and unique in the human spirit, and other societies or alien societies would not choose to leave their stars. So ang ibig lang sabihin lang niya, ayaw talaga ng mga aliens na umalis sa kanilang mga planeta. They don't want to leave their stars, they don't want to explore outer space. Unlike us, now our desire is unique. Gusto natin mag-explore where no man has gone before. Yun yung ating human spirit to explore. Pero itong mga alien civilization, siguro ayaw nilang magbiyahe, ayaw nilang mag-explore. So yun ang reason kaya wala tayong ma-encounter na alien civilizations because they would not choose to leave their planets. Now, a possible solution to the Fermi paradox in order to answer the question where is everyone, nasaan yung mga aliens at bakit tayo walang ma-encounter or ma-meet na aliens is that maybe these alien civilizations, they tend to destroy themselves. So this is one reason why we haven't met or encountered any alien civilizations is that these alien civilizations, they tend to destroy themselves. Just like in Star Wars, if you are aware of the Death Star. So the Death Star is a planet destroyer. So probably yun ang reason kung bakit wala tayong ma-encounter na alien life forms because these alien civilizations, they tend to destroy themselves. Now, another possible solution to the Fermi paradox kung bakit wala tayong makita or ma-meet na aliens, it's because there is a galactic civilization. May mga aliens, but they are deliberately avoiding us. They are hiding their existence from us. Or we haven't just found them yet. Baka hindi natin pa sila nakikita. So, ang mga aliens nandyan lang. Baka nasa paligid lang natin and they are deliberately avoiding us. So, iniiwasan lang tayo nila or they are hiding their existence from us. So, who knows? Baka yung katabi ninyo ay isang alien life form disguised as a human. No, diba? So, hindi natin alam. So, they are deliberately avoiding us or they are hiding their existence from us. So, hindi natin alam. Baka ganon kung bakit wala tayong ma-encounter na aliens. Kasi iniiwasan tayo or baka nandyan sila sa paligid or katabi nyo lang. They are hiding their existence from us. Alright. So the Voyager space probes are out in the solar system and into interstellar space. Hopefully that one day some alien life forms may encounter the Voyager space probes. Now, what is so special about the Voyager space probes? Now, inside Voyager is a golden record. Now, in this golden record are the images and songs of planet Earth. So hopefully some alien intelligent life forms may encounter the Voyager space probes and hopefully they would play that golden record so that they would know who we are. Sana may makapulot na advanced alien life forms sa Voyager and sana mapatugtog nila yung golden record na yan para malaman nila na hindi sila nag-iisa dito sa universe. So, ang katanungan ngayon na gusto natin sagutin ay kung meron bang aliens? May aliens ba? Are we alone in the universe? So the answer is we need more evidence. We need concrete evidence to support the idea that there are really alien civilizations out there. So our search for extraterrestrial life continues. We need to go where no man has gone before. Alright, so for now, we have only one planet Earth. And we probably won't have other ones for a long time. So what do we need to do? So we need to take care of our planet Earth. Alright, so that's our discussion of the search for extraterrestrial life. Alright, so that's about it for our lecture for tonight. Sana po marami kayong natutunan and I hope we were able to answer that basic question kung may aliens nga ba. Alright, so I hope you have enjoyed and you have learned a lot about this lecture. So again, please like and share this online lecture para po makatulong po sa ating mga estudyante sa pag-aaral ng siyensya. Alright, so I would like to thank the officers and crew of the Vedan Society of Young Astronomers, and also I would like to thank the administrators of San Beda University Senior High School Manila for their continued support of our organization. Alright, so this is Professor Jun Cahigal saying, live long and prosper, and I will see you next week for another episode of Space, the Final Frontier. Always stay safe and goodbye everybody. Good night.
There she is. NASA's Voyager 1. Launched in 1977.
But that's just very small potatoes compared to what the Earth is involved with and knows about.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
To go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.